Alright, in this lesson I'll introduce the between method, which like many of the methods so far is called directly on a series and helps to generate a brand new Boolean series. And as you might guess, the between method is helpful when we want to find values that fall between a range or within a specific range, whether it's of times or of dates. So let's take a look at how this can work on several different columns within our data frame. So let's execute our code to import our employees CSV. And let's say I wanted to pull out all of the employees who had a salary between $60,000 and $70,000 inclusive. So of course we could do this by writing two separate statements. We could write one Boolean series where we do greater than or equal to 60,000, one Boolean series where we have less than or equal to 70,000, use that ampersand, that and symbol within our square brackets to pull both of those conditions. But the between method makes it a lot simpler. So once again, let's begin by extracting a series like salary. And as I mentioned, I want to pull in the employees who have a salary between 60,000 and 70,000. So now I can call the between method directly on my series. It is a method, so it does take parentheses. And this is going to be slightly different than our previous methods because this will take two arguments. The first is going to be the lower bound, and the second is going to be the upper bound. So I want the value to be between 60,000, which is my first argument, comma 70,000, which is my second argument. And both of these values are inclusive. What that means is if there is a salary that's exactly 60,000 or exactly 70,000, it will be included. So between 60,000 and 70,000 inclusive, basically the equivalent of greater than or equal to combined with less than or equal to. So when I execute this, I'm going to get a brand new Boolean series of trues and falses. Let's just spare time by not assigning this to a variable. Let's directly input it within our square brackets after our data frame. And now we've extracted the salaries from the data frame that fall between 60,000 and 70,000. As I scroll down, you can see that in fact all of these numbers fall within that range. Pretty simple. Let's collapse this and repeat the process with our bonus column, which consists of floating points. Let's say I want to pull the rows or those employees that have a bonus between 2 and 5%. Once again, I begin by extracting my series. And there I have my series of floating point values representing the bonus percentages. Once again, I'm going to call the between method. I'm going to open my parentheses and provide a lower bound. In this case, it's going to be 2.0. And then an upper bound, which is where it ends. I'm going to provide 5.0. When I execute this, I'll get a Boolean series, true if it falls within that range, false if it does not. And once again, if I pass this within square brackets after my data frame, which is stored in df, there I have all of the rows from my data frame where the bonus falls within that 3-point range. As I scroll down, you can see this is true. What's really great about this is it also works on dates and times like we have in the start date and last login time column. And there's two things I want to mention here. First, this is one of the big advantages of converting our column from a string to a date time as operations like this become possible. So whenever we have something like a string, if this was being stored like a string, it would have no way of knowing what is between, what is start and what is end. Now, because it's a date time object, Pandas knows how to interpret it and is able to understand between as the start point of the date range and the end date of the date range. So once again, the process is the exact same. Let's say I want to pull out all of the employees who started in my year of birth, which is 1991. I can extract the start date column, and I can call the between method directly on it. My first argument is going to be my lower bound, which is my starting point, which in this case is the start date. So I'm going to put the 1st of January 1991. And my second argument is going to be my end date, where I want to go up to. I want to go up to the first day of 1992, which is January 1st, 1992. So now I have a Boolean series. True if it falls within 1991, false if it does not. I'm going to pass that to a Boolean series. And now I have all of the employees that have a start date within 1991. You can see all of these years are 1991 as I scroll down. And I'm going to collapse this and do One last example, and this just demonstrates a point, or rather repeats a point that I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is that the values in the last login time column for you will differ because you're going to be watching it on this video on a different day, a day in the future, hopefully, unless you've time traveled. And in that case, your date here is always going to be present date. So my dates here may fluctuate between lessons, and they will certainly be different from yours, but the most important thing here to keep track of is the time on the right, and that will be consistent for all lessons, and including on your end if you're following along. So once again, let's begin by extracting the series that we want to do a comparison on. It's going to be the last login time series. There I just used tab completion to fill it out. There is my Boolean series outputted below. And let's say I want to find the people who logged into the system between 8:30 a.m. and noon, which is 12 p.m. I once again call the between method, open my parentheses. The very first argument is the start point, so I want to start at 8:30 in the morning, and I could write it out really in any way I want. It's kind of amazing how flexible Pandas is. So you could certainly write it out in military format as you see below, but I can also do something like 8:30 a.m., so literally as a string, and Pandas will figure out what I'm talking about. Then place a comma, and then for the second argument, this is the endpoint. Let's say I place 12 p.m. or noon. Now I have a Boolean series. I can pass this in within square brackets after my data frame name, which is df. And now you can see all the people who logged in between 8:30 in the morning and noon. You can see as I scroll down that these values are all falling between those 3.5 hours. So that's the between method, accepts two arguments, the start point and the end point, can operate on a Boolean series of many different data types. In this lesson, we looked at integers, floats, dates, and times. And of course, it returns true if the value in the series falls between that point, and a false if it does not. Use that Boolean series that results as a filter series, just like we have with every other Boolean series that we've introduced. So that's the between method on a Pandas series.